never thought the worst night of my life would start with a dead crow on my windshield, up in the parking lot behind the self-storage place. It wasn't bloody or anything, just sprawled there, stiff, its black feathers slick with rain that had stopped an hour before. I remember thinking, who sees a dead bird and just leaves it like that? I brushed it off with my sleeve and tried not to look at its glassy eye, but I could feel it all the way down the length of my arm, some cold imprint that lingered. That was the first thing that made me uneasy, though I told myself it was nothing. I was there because my sister needed help moving out of her old storage unit, one of those squat concrete places out by the highway, backs up against a wooded ravine that always collects fog. She had a last-minute emergency at work and begged me to grab her boxes before the contract expired at midnight. I figured I'd be in and out in half an hour. Just a regular favor. The lot was empty except for my car and a pickup parked way down at the far end, engine ticking in the cool air. The office had that fluorescent hum you only notice when everything else is silent. I signed the clipboard, got a wave from the attendant, a pale guy with a cough who seemed glad to see someone, and followed the yellow arrows to Unit 117. As I walked, I noticed the concrete was still damp, and my shoes left dark prints in the thin sheen of water. The corridor felt longer than it looked, the overhead lights spaced just far enough apart that there were pockets of shadow puddling at the edges. I unlocked the unit and slid the door up. There was that smell you only get in places like this: cardboard, dust, old perfume, a hint of mildew. I started hauling out boxes and stacking them by the entrance, my breath fogging in the chill. I kept the door half open, so I could see out into the corridor. Not because I was scared, just because it felt wrong to close myself in. It was silent except for my own footsteps and the soft thud of boxes hitting each other. The first odd thing happened maybe 10 minutes in. I heard a noise from further down the row. Not footsteps exactly, more like something dragging across the concrete. I paused, holding a box to my chest, and listened. For a second I thought it was the wind against the metal doors, but it was too steady, too heavy. I set the box down and peeked out into the corridor. Nothing. The lights flickered once, making the shadows jump. The air felt thick, as if someone had just walked past me. I shook it off, told myself it was nerves. All these places are creepy when you're alone at night, I thought. I tried to hum to myself, but the sound died in my throat, swallowed by the concrete. I kept packing. A few minutes later, as I turned back to the unit, I noticed something odd about the boxes. One of the ones I'd set aside was open. I was sure I'd taped it shut. I remember struggling with the roll, muttering when I couldn't find the end. The flaps were just peeled back. Nothing missing as far as I could tell, but the tape was dangling from the edge, stretched, like someone had pulled it up in a hurry. I told myself maybe I'd been careless. Maybe the tape hadn't stuck in the cold, but I couldn't quite convince myself. I repacked the box, this time pressing the tape down hard, running my thumb along the seam until it stung. I caught myself glancing over my shoulder, trying to see if the corridor looked any different than before. It did. The damp footprints I'd left earlier had blurred, as if someone had walked over them in the opposite direction, smudged them up, then vanished. There were fresh marks beside mine, barely there, but I could see them if I looked long enough. They were lighter, almost like residue, and they crisscrossed with mine before drifting off toward the darker end of the hallway. I crouched, squinting, trying to figure out if they were just drips from a leak or actual prints, but when I reached out to touch one, the concrete was dry and rough as sandpaper. Nothing to explain it. I stood up too quickly, head buzzing. My throat felt tight, itchy from the damp air, or maybe from holding my breath. I told myself I was just being jumpy. The mind plays tricks when you're alone at night, right? I forced myself to keep moving, stacking another box on the dolly, rolling it out toward the car. The silence outside was even heavier, broken only by the far-off sound of a truck shifting gears on the highway. The other car in the lot, the pickup, was still there, But the cab was empty now. I tried not to look for anyone standing nearby. Back inside, I worked faster, organizing things almost frantically. I kept glancing at the time, watching the red numbers on my phone screen flick forward, each minute heavier than the last. That's when I noticed the smell. Not the usual musty storage smell, but something new. Sharp and metallic, like the air before a storm. It caught in the back of my nose and made my eyes water. I sniffed at the boxes, the concrete, even checked the air vent above the door, but couldn't pin it down. It seemed to move with me, fading when I stopped and swelling when I walked. My skin prickled. I caught the faintest sound, a soft tap tap tap, like fingertips drumming against metal, echoing from further down the corridor. It paused when I froze, and started again when I moved. I tried to time my steps against it, but it always stayed a heartbeat out of sync. I called out, "Hello?" My voice bounced back, muffled, and nothing answered. I waited, straining to hear footsteps, laughter, anything. The silence after my voice faded felt bottomless. I tried to distract myself by checking my phone again, but I barely had a bar of service, and the battery was already down to 14%. I texted my sister a quick update, just to see the little bubble pop up, but nothing went through. I figured it was the concrete walls, or the storm rolling in. I had the weirdest urge to reread the message I'd sent, as if I'd get a reply if I stared long enough. That's when the lights flickered again, longer this time. When they steadied, I realized the corridor looked different. The length felt off, like the row of units stretched further than before, the perspective subtly wrong. I counted the doors. There were more than when I'd first walked down. The numbers were off too. 115, 116, 117. Then, 121. The next one just had a blank steel plate, the paint worn clean. My hand tingled, and I gripped the dolly handle so hard my knuckles ached. I tried to focus on practical things. The weight of the boxes, the scrape of the dolly wheels, the familiar ache in my lower back. But every sound seemed amplified. The lights buzzed like angry insects. Somewhere a latch clicked, sharp and close. But when I spun around, the corridor was empty, except for the shifting shadows. As I turned back to the unit, something caught my eye. The door to 119, which I was sure had been closed, was now cracked open, just enough for a sliver of darkness to show. I stared, telling myself it might have slipped in the damp, or maybe someone else was clearing out their unit late just like me. But I couldn't shake the way the darkness seemed thicker there, almost oily, like the light refused to touch it. Goosebumps crawled up my arms. I tried to focus on loading the last box, but my hands felt clumsy, fingers numb even though the air wasn't that cold anymore. As I hefted the box, I heard it again. The dragging sound, closer, urgent now, as if something just around the corner was pulling itself along the concrete. I set the box down so hard the contents rattled. I listened, every muscle tensed. The sound stopped. Then came a faint whisper, like breath pressed through teeth. I strained to make out words, but it was only sibilance, rising and falling, almost matching the pulse in my ears. I found myself stepping back, glancing from my half-closed unit to that open door at 119. For a moment, I thought I saw movement inside, a shape shifting behind the gap, something pale against the black. My mouth went dry. I told myself to leave it, just grab my things and go. But I couldn't move. My body rooted itself to the spot as if it expected something to step out and explain all of this. A metallic clatter made me jump, a lock dropping, echoing down the hall. I nearly bolted, but my keys were still inside the unit, on top of a box. I darted back in, heart thudding so loud I thought whoever, or whatever, was out there could hear it. As I reached for the keys, the dull fluorescent lights overhead dimmed, flickered, and then the corridor outside fell almost completely dark. Only the weak emergency light at the far end cast a dirty yellow glow, stretching the shadows even longer. I waited, frozen in place, barely breathing. The silence had shifted. It wasn't empty now but thick, humming, pressing at my ears. I heard the faint rustle of cardboard behind me, as if someone was sifting through the boxes I'd already stacked. I spun around, the keys biting my palm, but the unit was empty. Still, the air behind me felt disturbed, heavier somehow, as if something unseen had just brushed past. I forced myself to step out into the corridor, cradling the keys in my fist. The open door of 119 was wider now, gaping. I tried not to look, but as I hurried past, a cold draft washed over me, sharp with that metallic scent, tinged now with something sweet and rotten. My vision blurred, and for a split second, I thought I saw a figure crouched inside, hunched, limbs too long, head cocked. But as I blinked, there was nothing. Just darkness, and the echo of my own gasp. I half ran toward the exit, the dolly rattling behind me. The corridor seemed to stretch, doors multiplying, numbers repeating and skipping. I kept my eyes on the emergency light, each step taking forever to land. The dragging sound returned, now from behind, quickening to match my pace. I didn't dare look back. When I finally burst into the open lot, the night air hit me like a slap. My car was there, headlights reflecting in puddles. The pickup was gone. I loaded the boxes as fast as I could, fingers slipping on the damp plastic. The storage office was dark. No sign of the attendant, the window gaping open with the curtain blowing out into the lot. I fumbled with my keys, cursing under my breath, half expecting a hand to land on my shoulder. I shoved the last box in and slammed the trunk. Only then did I allow myself to look back. The corridor behind me was empty, but the door to 119 stood wide open, darkness spilling out like ink. For an instant,